Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today, What the Top 1% of Storytellers Do Differently. My name is Sruthi Kumar. I'm the Director of Demand Gen at TripActions, and I'm so excited to be here with my friend, Bri.
Thanks, Sruthi. I'm Brianna Valleskey, the head of content at Inscribe. I'm also very excited to be here with my dear friend Sruthi and fellow winner of the 2022 Experimental Marketer of the Year Award. And it seems only appropriate to start this session with a story about connecting humans to a brand, a love story between me and Grammarly. Grammarly came out right around the time when I was in college. As a lifelong writer studying journalism, I was, of course, their target audience. And the first ads I ever saw from Grammarly were student related, like the Edit Essays Faster one you can see here on the screen. Oh, hey, I'm a student. I would love to edit essays faster. So I downloaded Grammarly. And I saw my own story in the ads they were sharing. I also started following them on social media. And I would retweet posts that they felt very relevant to me and felt like stories from my own life. I think most content creators have been in that place where it's like, insert epic title here. I will come up with an awesome title for this presentation later. And then when I graduated from college and entered the work world as a content professional, I continued to see Grammarly ads that represented my story, like that Win at Work with Grammarly ad you can see on the bottom left here. I too would like to win at work, I thought to myself. So I became a Grammarly premium user and have never looked back. And even now, as a longtime brand loyalist and evangelist, they're still delighting me with stories about myself. Like when they tell me I'm a creative cosmonaut, or that I was more productive than 90% of Grammarly users last week. Thank you, Grammarly. I am a creative cosmonaut, or at least I'd like to think that I am. And in this way, Grammarly has used stories to capture me more than a decade ago and keep me as a loyal brand follower and advocate ever since.
Bri, in my opinion, you are a creative cosmonaut, so they're not wrong. So brand that I love, Peloton. So if you're familiar, great. If you're not, they stream fitness classes live and on demand. So of course, when everything went virtual during 2020, its stock rose. And of course, as the world found a new normal and people returned to gyms and didn't need to ride their bike at home anymore or get on the tread or even their new rowing machine, the stock fell. So through it all, though, they have built an unimaginable brand. They're featured in TV shows like The Simpsons Above. They have social campaigns with celebrities like T-Pain in this slide. And now their Peloton treads have runs with folks of the likes of Ashton Kutcher, Natalie Portman, and Kim Kardashian. They also know how to push the brand beyond the company brand. They've helped their instructors build brands on their own, so much so that one of their popular instructors, Cody Rigsby, was on Dancing with the Stars last season and came in second runner-up. These instructors even tell their own stories on rides and runs as well. And Bri's going to share why stories are important.
So why were these brands able to connect to people like me and Sruthi? And stories connect people to brands because we're wired for story. This is a wonderfully poetic quote from Brene Brown, who needs no introduction. But more importantly, this is scientifically accurate. Storytelling evokes a strong neurological response in the human brain. Research from neuroeconomist Paul Zak shows that our brains produce cortisol, the stress hormone, during tense moments in a story, while sweet or nice elements of a story can cause our brains to elicit oxytocin, a chemical that makes us feel good. Character-driven stories with emotional content specifically result in a better understanding of the key points a speaker wishes to make and enable better recall of these points weeks later.
So Bri just talked about a bunch of stories and why stories are important. And I'm showing you a bunch of logos of brands. So what do these brands have in common? These are all brands that have told us stories and told us stories that we believe in. And they use these stories everywhere, across all channels, throughout the entire customer lifecycle in a very cohesive and integrated way. And you can see examples of all of these logos sharing various stories in a couple of images that we have. The top one on the left is from Salesforce. It's a billboard off of a very popular freeway in the Bay Area. And you can see their story about Mercedes-Benz there being featured for all the cars passing by.
You go to Metadata's website, boom, right at the top of the fold, you got a customer story there. Stripe is always sharing customer stories on their social media. Gong always brings their customers to share stories at their live and virtual events. Slack is always pulling examples of best practices of how their customers use Slack and sharing those stories on the Slack social media. And then, of course, Figma is really, really big on having a ton of customer success stories on their website.
But here's the problem. Most companies know they should be using stories, but they don't know how. And every company should be using stories for demand. We're going to be talking about where stories can be found, how to use them across many different channels, and why telling stories creates demand for your product.
The first point that we're going to cover here is a brief moment to touch on the difference between a strategic narrative for your company and a brand or customer story. A strategic narrative is more of a belief or idea that can exist without your brand. Think of just do it with Nike. I don't have to believe in Nike to know that I can just take action and take control of my life and be a winner. But a brand or customer story is very specifically about an event or experience, and it's about a person. So it's very different. It can include your brand, but again, is not about your brand. And another quick side note here is a testimonial is not inherently a story. Someone singing praises about your product or solution is not a story. A story involves a beginning in which a challenge is presented, a middle, and an end. It's not impossible for a testimonial quote to include all three of those segments, but most of them in general don't. And the other thing that I'll add here is that it's better to tell a story that is authentic and true than make it fit into a framework that you feel like it needs to fit into, like the hero's journey. Sometimes we are the hero in our own story, but sometimes we're also the sage and the sword. There are, books or agencies that'll try to sell you a framework to build one story for your brand, but I've never seen a successful brand that only tells one story. The top 1% of B2B brands tell many stories. They might be the same type of story, or they might have similar endings, but it's not the same story. And plus, there are so many different types of stories that you can be utilizing in your storytelling: rags to riches, revenge, rebirth, voyage and return, overcoming the monster, etc., etc.
Thank you, Bri. And I also think people underestimate stories. You just talked about all the different types of stories we can tell. But there is a perception that marketing should be telling one story, and that's a product featured focused story. But when you only focus on the product, you aren't selling a solution to the problem that your technology or service solves. When you tell stories, you show people the problem, and then they can see themselves in that problem and understand that the solution is to work with you and your product. Simple enough. But it's not enough just for your content team to create stories. It cannot just exist on the blog or case study section of your website. You need to take these stories and continuously put them in front of your prospects and customers across all your demand channels. So an example is the G2 report. G2 is a peer-to-peer review site, but they also release a seasonal report. We at TripActions even use that seasonal report in our own demand gen function, and we put it out. We make sure prospects see it and customers see it. It's a report, but it tells people how our product helps people and how we're a leader in the space. And now we're going to tell you how to do exactly just that. Step 1, discovery.
So let me take you back to March 9th of 2020. We started hearing about this thing called the coronavirus, and even a few major industry events had been canceled or postponed. But most of us were still in person. And on that particular day, the second of 2 major events in the tech industry had been canceled in that same week. So we were seeing this cascade of events being canceled. Our sales reps started telling us they didn't feel comfortable going to events. And we were at a major crossroads. We knew we needed to get in front of people, and all the ways we had planned to do so, all the engagement strategies for our prospects and customers, it wasn't an option anymore. Our primary audience at the time comprised of revenue teams, a large majority of which were marketers like ourselves. So on that day, Sruthi and I sat down and we just documented her experience as a field marketer who was suddenly faced with having to change their 6 or 12 month marketing plan. We wrote a blog about it at all of our events being canceled, and we included advice and ideas for what other marketers could do instead, how they could still engage their prospects and customers without events or even the ability to be in person. We were experimenting at the same time that we were trying to share information and help others. You can even see on that photo on the left that we were trying things like LinkedIn Live, which was still fairly new at that time. And after we posted that original blog on that day, we kept sharing ideas and information from different marketers on our own team. We drafted a piece for our CMO at the time about how marketing leaders and teams could make strategic and decisive actions during what we were all calling uncertain times. And then our head of lifecycle marketing, just a few days after that, put out a piece with tactics for maintaining connections as social distancing protocols started taking place. But those were just stories coming from our own team that we could speak to because we were part of our audience. It was only the beginning, though. Our dilemma was shared by our customers, our prospects, and even our partners. So we started talking to people across all sorts of roles and leadership levels within revenue teams, managers, VPs, CMOs. Max Altschuler, back when he was back at Outreach, wrote a piece for our blog. Kyle Coleman from Clary wrote a piece about how SDR teams could pivot during that time. And we even did a video interview series, just really trying to understand what people were doing during these, I swear I won't say it anymore after this slide, uncertain times, because we've heard enough of it for our entire lives. But one of the big light bulb moments for understanding the story was when Megan Eisenberg said to us, "When there's no wind, row." And that was it. We knew the answer. Events were canceled, but the show must go on. By this point, we had assembled quite a collection of content, and we knew we needed to tell these stories and that sharing this information would be helpful for others. So we decided to bring it to life with an event. But before that, Sruthi is going to talk about how you can uncover these authentic stories for your own team.
Thanks, Bree. So a couple of the things that we did ourselves was interview customers. So you have access to your key persona. They're the ones who brought your product. So interview them, ask them about their journey with your solution. How did it make their day-to-day better? While you're doing this too, you don't only need to uncover stories about your product, but you can also tell their stories of just their daily struggles. Make sure you have permission to publish their story, though, across all the different channels that you will be using it on. Interview your colleagues. You have colleagues or teammates who are also your persona. So if you sell into the finance team, interview your finance team. If you sell into procurement, interview your procurement team. You can interview them about your solution, and they know exactly the stories that you help to solve because they're working with our customers every day. And very last, but it helps, is interview yourself. You are your own persona. You can document your journey or experience with your solution. And of course, make sure you have permission to publish your own story. Even if it's your own, know that you should be using it in all different channels.
And now we will take you to step 2, which is the main event, so to speak, and that is delivery of your stories. And I'll turn it back over to Sruthi to tell us more about this.
So by now, many of us or most of us had gone fully virtual. You can see the screenshot to the right. We're all wearing our matching work from home sweaters that our colleague had made for us. But this is when we were really faced with the challenge of bringing all these stories that we had gathered from just a couple slides ago to our prospects. So we put on a virtual event and aptly named it "The Show Must Go On." We knew we wanted to bring these stories to our prospects. So in your own step-by-step, when you're thinking about this, now you have a story. What do you do with it? How do you bring it to a stage and get it in front of your prospects in a compelling way? So the best thing for my best piece of advice here is meeting your prospects where they are. So when you're talking about in-person events, and if you're a tech company, you're probably not going to host an event in Alaska. That's not where most of your prospects are going to be, but you could probably do a successful regional event in Salt Lake City, Austin, or other places tech companies are. So we applied the same mindset to our digital stories. So putting the story on the stage across different channels where our prospects might be. So email, social. Specifically here, you can see a bunch of screenshots from Show Must Go on socials, on our social channels. We wanted to show people's faces so that people could see themselves in their story in the posts, and that we're all coming from our social accounts during the live event.
And we also really made sure to have a very thoughtful mix of the different types of stories that we were going to tell. Most B2B stories tend to fall into one or sometimes multiple of these three categories. Now that I've said that, someone's going to tweet at me and tell me that they don't, but that's okay. At the highest level, on the left side of the screen, you have your strategic story. This is about the how or why you or your audience needs to do something, needs to take an action. It proposes that you need to do some sort of action to either survive, navigate a challenge, or to thrive, achieve a goal. Typically because something will change, is changing, or has changed. In the case of our story, it was the beginning of the pandemic. So much stuff had changed already and was continuing to change. If you do not convince your buyers that they need to take an action, they will not buy. You can also think of these three sets of stories as sort of tofu, mofu, bofu. Top of funnel is strategic, telling people why they need to take action. Middle of funnel is tactical, telling them how to take action. And bottom of funnel is success, telling them, painting a picture of how awesome their life is going to be when they take action. But focusing again on tactical, a tactical story is more on the ground level, sharing a framework or specific steps for how to do something. And note that all of these stories, I know Sruthi has said it a couple times, but it's worth repeating. It's got to come from practitioners in the field. Can they be practitioners that work in your own company? Yeah, absolutely. If you are selling sales tech, talk to your salespeople. If you're selling HR tech, talk to your HR people. As long as it's not coming from some vague entity like your company, people want to consume stories about people. And if you don't show your buyers how to take action, they will not buy. Then finally, you have your success story, which is especially effective at the bottom of the funnel, where your buyers know that they have to take action. They know how to take action. And now they need to know what tool they will use to take action. Success stories are actual accounts of people using your solution to overcome a challenge or achieve a goal. And if you do not show your buyers how they can be successful with your solution, they will not buy.
So this might be new to everyone, but sometimes marketers have to start from scratch. You might be new to a team or working on a product that is new to your company, or in a brand new situation like Bri and I at the beginning of the pandemic. But if you have stories, you should be focusing on no net new content. If you are putting your time and effort into putting together these stories, then you have to be recycling them. You already did the work, so now get it out there. So after the event, we were still promoting the on-demand sessions for the event, as you can see in the social posts here. And we also started recycling that content. And what's great is you don't always have to do it yourself. Some of our speakers wrote their own blog recaps and even promoted them post-event. You can see this example on the right from Abby Hammer from Churn Zero. And as part of this event, as Bri shared, we did talk about, we did a session called the Marketer Support Group, where a couple of marketers on our team shared our own approach to the next 6 months as we were reworking our plans. We talked to our head of lifecycle, our head of product marketing, and myself. So we were sharing our own pains that we were facing at the time and our creative solutions to it. And we may or may not have even talked about our own product a little bit. But we did recycle them into blogs, and we didn't need to publish them all at once. You can see that we published the recaps over a series of months afterwards. So our content calendar sort of created itself, which amazing job, Bri. That was great.
I can hardly take credit. It is always a full team effort to do amazing things like this. So not only were we able to turn the content from the event into on-demand sessions that we promoted and those blog posts that you saw from Sruthi, and of course we were promoting those through all of our earned and paid channels, email, ads, social media, but we did actually get a couple of full-blown case studies. The first one on the top there was an awesome case study from Gong that started as the actual story from their session at the event, which made it very easy to just turn that into a written case study. And then that second one from Guru was not actually based on the content of their session from the event. The story shared during the event was more about leading with empathy, which is also a very important story to tell. But having our contact, Julia, host the session at the Show Must Go On, which is what laid the foundation for us to work on a case study with her and her team later that year. And all of these examples really culminate into what we're calling the genealogy of a story. So on the top left-hand corner of this slide, those bright green dotted lines, you have the blog and video content we created before the virtual event, all that stuff we were doing right as the pandemic was starting, to tell the story of how people could keep going and making sure that they were hitting their pipeline and revenue goals, which then we promoted all that content on our earned and paid channels. Then on the top right-hand corner of this slide, now would be a great time for a laser pointer, but I don't have one, so bear with me. On the top right-hand corner, you have the dark green dotted lines, and that's really all the on-demand content from the event, which we also promoted in all of our channels, ads, and social. And then with all of those solid lines underneath the big orange Show Must Go On virtual event circle in the middle, that's content from the event itself. So pre-event, we had social media, email, ads promoting the event and the content and promoting how people can register. Then during the event itself, we had live social posting. And after the event, we also promoted on-demand content to registrants in very segmented emails and nurtures. And then, of course, all the way on the right side, we got all that blog and case study content from the event, which we were able to promote across all of our channels as well. And so you can see how you can have so many stories within a larger theme or narrative. This is supposed to be an umbrella. I don't know how well you can see me doing this gesture right now. But really that each of those stories can be used also in a number of different ways. And we know that repetition for your audience members is critical. It takes 6 to 8 ad impressions or touch points for someone to convert. So as long as you aren't repeatedly spamming people with the exact same content or the exact same messages, repetition will generally work in your favor.
Wow, Brie, that was amazing. Amazing slide. But, we're on our takeaway slide. I can't believe the session went by this quickly, but I just wanted to share a couple of things about the metrics. I know we're talking to demand marketers who care about metrics. So just to let you know what did happen with Show Must Go On. We exceeded our registration goal by 120%. 43% of that were net new leads, and we had hundreds of ops and millions in pipeline influenced. And so something else too that was interesting, we talked a lot about recycling content. Post campaign, we grew our campaign numbers by 15%. So just showing you it does pay off with all the blogs and the social posts that we just showed you. But Brie, I wanted to ask you, I know I'm a little biased, but why do you think this story worked?
I, too, am admittedly a little biased here, but what was so powerful about this story is it wasn't a story about me or you or this person or that person or our company or our team. It was a story about all of us. Literally everyone in the industry, we were going through the same thing at the same time. And you don't always need a world-changing event to find those stories that are relevant to, certain groups in your audience, most of your audience, or your entire audience. There are always themes happening, trends happening, stories to be discovered that can be widely relevant for many people in your industry. So we've got our takeaways here. I'm not going to read them off to you, but we will let you guys go to the rest of your day in this amazing conference. I'll just leave you with an amazing quote from Harrison Monarch from a really fantastic Harvard Business Review article, one that I would highly recommend checking out if you are embarrassingly fascinated by storytelling like I am. But he says, storytelling may seem like an old-fashioned tool, and that's because it is. That's what makes it so powerful. Life happens in narratives we tell one another. A story can go where data and quantitative analysis is denied admission. Our hearts. Data can persuade people, but it doesn't inspire them to act. To do that, you need to wrap your vision in a story that fires the imagination and stirs the soul.
Thank you so much for Metadata for having us today. Thank you, Bree, for speaking with me. You can find both of us telling our stories on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can find our handles here. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.